All right, let's just confirm everything's working smoothly over here. No more of that vertical BS from YouTube. I'm not having it. Let me know how the sound's coming through as well. Did make some changes to the audio. Trying to make sure everything's going smoothly as possible here before we get started. Patrick, Vivian, Boris, Jordan, cheers. Donkey Kong. That's what it's all about, my friend. There's no quitters here. Thanks, Boris. Appreciate that, brother. We are looking good. Analytics look good. Stream settings running strongly. 6,000. Let's check the stream health here to confirm. Stream health is excellent. 6,000 kilobytes per second. Everything seems to be running smoothly on my end. Closed captions are on for anyone who needs them. Thanks, Everlong. I appreciate it, bro. Yeah, Andrew, you know, I've been noticing that. Yeah, here, how about that? I just turned up the volume a little bit further. That's pretty much as loud as I can make my volume here. I think it should make a marked difference there as well. May be able to go into my properties and adjust it slightly. We can see. Okay, you can hear this better? This sounds better? I'm showing in my audio here in the yellow bars, which is where I'm supposed to be. And I'm getting the sound is great. I can hear you clearly. That is better. Thank you, Andrew, Benjamin, Lizzie. I appreciate you guys. All right. Now we're on to something here. Looks a lot better. Welcome, Valerie. Welcome to the channel. Shout out to Typo Negative, John Doe, all channel members as well. Thank you, everybody. Dana, welcome back, my friend. Dana, there's my future ex-wife right there, just so you guys know. And she knows I'm kidding because she'd say the same thing about me. Ain't that right? It's official, everybody. Janet Yellen has officially resigned, effective immediately. Well, things are moving along very nicely here, and it's seeming more and more likely that the situation in finance and in government is being set up to actually crush us with inflation. And Janet Yellen and Gary Gensler are doing a great job in making sure that happens. There we go. Finally got it. And the peasants rejoice. Typo Negative, man. That's too kind of you. Huge shout out and thank you to Typo Negative for being a channel member and subscriber and gifting out 10 memberships to the channel. That is amazing. Thank you, my friend. Very cool of you. So cheers. You know what? I may have to turn down that label there for that alert box every time it makes that sound. I mean, it's pretty cool, I gotta say. But every time it's going to make that sound, that's a little much. I am going to have to adjust that. Which it's still pretty hilarious, I got to say. Our welcome channel members. I'll give it a chance to work through. Thank you very much again. It's a typo negative, my friend. That's very nice of you. There, we just really crank that down a lot. Welcome to everybody. So old Yeller is finally leaving us. Janet Yellen is exiting as head of the U.S. Treasury before Trump can fire her. Keith DeWitt. An AMC squeeze is never late, nor is it early. It arrives precisely when it means to. Long Jericho says, thanks for changing the format. You're welcome, my friend. As you can see, I was playing around with something new here. I really do like this. I was not a fan of the vertical format on YouTube, especially for the people watching it on television or on, or on your computer. Even though a lot of people watch on their phones, still the number one way to watch YouTube is, of course, on television. Is on the mobile. But still, for the people that are watching it on the computer and on TV, it is just way too hard. And it's easy to zoom in on your phone, not so much on your TV. So that's one of the things I do like about it there quite a bit. I'm not sure if Yellen would collect unemployment, my friend. That's for sure. But she did officially resign. And as you can see here, of course, Chair Gensler also resigned effective January 20th. But Janet Yellen, on the other hand, her resignation is immediate. She is gone. Gary says your ex-girlfriend, old Yeller, was toxic. And these are facts. Facts. Toxic bitch. Can't stand her. So glad she's gone. Let's put it that way. But we got quite a bit of information to cover here. Let's watch. I got a video here that I am really pumped about. Congressman Byron Donalds, of all people, somebody that I'm not a fan of whatsoever, but I can still give people credit where credit is due. Byron Donalds comes out and says that Gary Gensler was the chief financial officer for Hillary Clinton's 2016 presidential campaign. In today's financial committee hearing, he, under oath, stated that Gary was unaware that the Clinton campaign facilitated the payment for the Steele dossier. How could a campaign CFO be unaware of a $1 million payment? Do you really believe that old Gary Gensler, experience on Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, top dog at these multiple financial firms, top dog for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign, did not know that Hillary and team actually proceeded with making a $1 million payment? What kind of CFO does not know that a $1 million payment's going out? They all know. He knew.
Hey, real quick, last question. I think it might have came up. You were Hillary Clinton's CFO in the campaign, right?
It's part of my history.
Were you? Yes or no?
In 2016.
Did you facilitate the payment for the Steele dossier since you were CFO of the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Sir.
Yes or no?
Sir.
Yes or no?
That was not.
You're under oath, Chairman Gensler. Yes or no?
I know. It was not something I was aware of.
I yield back the rest of my time. Thank you, Chairman. Hey, real quick, last question. I think it might have came up. You were Hillary Clinton's CFO in the campaign, right?
It's part of my history.
Were you? Yes or no?
In 2016.
Did you facilitate the payment for the Steele dossier since you were CFO of the Hillary Clinton campaign?
Sir.
Yes or no?
Sir.
Yes or no?
That That was not.
You're under oath, Chairman Gensler. Yes or
I
no?
know. It was not something I was aware of.
I yield back the rest of my time. Thank you.
I know. It was not something I was aware of.
How can the chief financial officer for Hillary Clinton's campaign not notice a $1 million payment or even $1 million missing from the bank account and claiming that he was unaware about that payment? Maybe he didn't know it was missing. Maybe he really was unable to see that. Hence is probably likely why he's unable to see the market manipulation occurring on cryptocurrencies, precious metals, heavily shorted equities, stocks, GameStop, AMC, silver, gold, XRP, XLM, Doge. The list goes on. But this does not look to me like somebody who is telling the truth. It looks to me like somebody who's avoiding answering the question. Just in, the crowd goes absolutely nuts after Donald Trump vows to fire SEC Chair Gary Gensler during the Bitcoin conference in Nashville, Tennessee.
The moment I'm sworn in, the persecution stops and the weaponization ends against your industry. And as long as I'm in the Oval Office, Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, do you remember? Yes, I'm an Indian. Yes, she said, I'm an Indian. Why are you an Indian? You don't look like an Indian. No, my mother told me I have high cheekbones. Oh, that's why she was an Indian. So I named her Pocahontas. Elizabeth Warren and her goons, and she's very nasty to you. She hates your people. She hates everything about you. Will keep their hands off Bitcoin. They're going to keep their hands off crypto. They're going to let it grow. We're going to let it grow. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman. I didn't know he was that unpopular.
Oh, very much so.
Well, I didn't know he was that unpopular. Let me say it again. On day one, I will fire Gary Gensler. Whoa. And we'll appoint a new SEC chairman who believes America should build the future, not block the future, which is what they're doing.
People went absolutely wild. Wild. That was insane, the way that people responded to that. Trump was clearly surprised by this reaction, says Colin Rugg, and he's completely right. He came out and said, on day one, I'll fire Gary Gensler and appoint a new SEC chairman. I didn't know he was that unpopular. And people just went crazy. As a matter of fact, we even have Senator Vance, J.D. Vance, come out and politically targeting Gary Gensler. Vance says the United States SEC has been politically weaponized by Gensler, who's Hillary Clinton's former campaign finance manager, as we just told you guys about the Steele dossier $1 million payment that supposedly Gensler didn't know about. And Vance actually threatens Gensler here. Maybe I can appeal to your sense of self-interest. If you guys use the SEC in such a politically motivated way, eventually you're going to be out of power. He also called out Gurbir Gruel, who, of course, just recently resigned from the SEC, or is resigning as well, announced his that he's leaving the firm.
Senator Vance from Ohio is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks to you and the ranking member for having this hearing, and thanks to Chairman Gensler for being here. I want to just ask a few questions about personnel at the SEC, Mr. Gensler. So let's just start out with the very top, with you. In 2016, you were the CFO of Hillary Clinton's failed presidential campaign. Is that correct?
I was proud to be chief financial officer to the Clinton campaign.
Great. Chairman Gensler, is it also correct that your current enforcement director, Gerber Grewal, was most recently the Attorney General of New Jersey? A yes or no answer will suffice.
He served his nation well, and he was Attorney General of New Jersey.
So just to recap, the Attorney General of New Jersey is the guy who refused to enforce immigration laws and cooperate with ICE. He also launched, I believe, 8 separate investigations against Donald Trump during his time as Attorney General. Chairman Gensler, is it also correct that your recently hired General Counsel, Megan Barbero, was previously Deputy General Counsel under Nancy Pelosi and litigated 2 impeachment hearings against Donald Trump?
I believe she was Deputy General Counsel of the House of Representatives.
Great. So, and I'll also note that one of your senior enforcement counsels is married to Peter Strzok. My point here, Mr. Gensler, is that you seem to have a very troubling pattern of hiring at an impartial regulatory agency a lot of people who seem to have a vendetta against the former president. And I fear and I worry that that has implicated itself and affected the policy at the SEC. Chairman Gensler, when did the SEC take its first enforcement action against a SPAC? Do you know the exact time?
Senator, we'd have to get back to you. I don't know what decade that was.
So according to my staff's research, September of 2021 is the first time that you guys at the SEC launched enforcement action against a SPAC. So I want to recap just a few things, and then I want to ask a question. First, you were Clinton's finance director in 2016, Hillary Clinton's finance director. Second, you hired anti-Trump enforcement director Grewal in July of 2021. Third, you brought in Ms. Barbero, who was the litigator on 2 House impeachment trials against Donald Trump. You have another enforcement counsel who is married to Peter Strzok. In November of 2021, Senator Warren urged you to investigate the SPAC merger involving Donald Trump's Truth Social company. And in December of 2021, just a few weeks later, you guys launched an investigation using a novel legal theory against the former president's social media company. That is some coincidence, isn't it, Mr. Gensler?
Senator, it is good to meet you in person, but I think you're not correct.
What was I not correct about there?
That's hilarious.
We follow the facts and the law wherever they are. And with regard to the SPAC field, the Special Purpose Acquisition Company field, there have been abuses, as you mentioned, one in 2018 that we found, and there are times that we do open investigations.
So the problem that I have, Chairman Gensler, is not with you investigating SPAC mergers. The problem is investigating a SPAC merger using a novel legal theory against your boss, Joe Biden's chief political rival. Also against a social media company, which of course at the time, Twitter and Facebook and every social media company had banned the former president. So you can make a pretty good argument that the SEC was using its enforcement powers to silence the chief political rival of the current president. Now let me just offer another observation here. We are rightfully concerned in this chamber, at least on my side of the aisle, about the weaponization of the Department of Justice. But I'm increasingly worried that we should be more worried about the weaponization of the Securities and Exchange Commission. It looks more and more like not an impartial regulatory body protecting investors and consumers, but a regulatory body that it's using its power to silence and immiserate political rivals of the current president of the United States. I have just one final question on that, Chairman Gensler. Have you ever spoken to anyone at the White House about your investigation of Donald Trump's Truth Social?
Sir, I don't speak.
Yes or no?
I don't know, sir. I'm going to answer the question. I don't speak to the White House about anything in our enforcement group or our investigations.
So I'm mindful of, thank you for the answer. I'm mindful of the time here. So let me just offer one final observation. I have little hope that I could persuade you that hiring committed partisans and using the regulatory powers of the SEC in a way that looks, and I think is, politically partisan is a true threat to American democracy. But maybe I can appeal to your sense of self-interest. If you guys use the SEC in such a politically motivated way, eventually you're going to be out of power. And I have to say, Chairman Gensler, turnabout is fair play. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Absolutely roasted. Absolutely roasted the guy.
Senator,
Gary Gensler didn't know what to do. The man had so much to say, but at the same time said nothing at all. It really appears as if, like, yeah, Mark, you got a good point. Gary Gensler was on the back foot the entire time, trying to call out minor technicalities in the verbiage used by J.D. Vance is not a really great way to make yourself look unguilty or not guilty of doing the things that you're being accused about. Check this out. This is something you guys got to see. In regards to Janet Yellen. Get this up on the right screen there so you can see it. Janet Yellen departs from office as she leaves a nasty mess behind her. Leaving a trail of mismanagement behind her, Janet Yellen is now history. She engaged in financial chicanery to keep interest rates low and not spook the stock market during an election year. Now, of course, Donald Trump, as the future president, and Scott Bessent, who will head the U.S. Treasury, are the ones that are going to have to clean up this mess. And oh boy, is this a hot mess. That is an understatement, to say the least. So you can see here, Scott Bessent is going to be the Treasury Secretary. He is a former CEO of Key Square Capital Management, a hedge fund. He is former Chief Investment Officer of Soros Fund Management, a Council on Foreign Relations member, and a University of Yale graduate. Absolutely tremendously qualified individual for this. I'm just glad that it's not somebody that worked for Citadel. Naturally, a hedge fund manager is probably the best person that we could have possibly asked for to actually run and handle our country, run the Treasury and handle the money in the United States of America. Here you have Yellen, one of many times. Here is Janet Yellen warning about the rising fraud, stability risks, and liquidity issues within the banking sector shortly after Tether minted another 1 billion USDT. Check this out. Either way, XRP's ODL is the solution for the next banking crisis.
And certainly we have been hearing loud and clear from the banking community that the burdens of compliance have become quite extraordinary. I think one principle that's helpful is tailoring, trying to make sure that the complexity and severity of the regulations fit the footprint of the activities of banks of different sizes and complexity. But there are so many areas that are important, to my mind, no longer being directly a bank regulator, but worrying about financial stability and the strength of the economy, knowing how important it is to have a healthy banking system in order to have a healthy and resilient economy. I guess my predilection is very much toward robust capital liquidity to make sure that we do have a banking system that can support the economy that's safe and sound.
You heard the lady. This isn't the first time that she said this. This was on October 30th. So less than about 3 weeks ago, Yellen was talking about this again. And this isn't the first time. She's told us time and time again that over-leveraged hedge funds and shadow banks, lending in the shadow banking sector, are the number one risks to global financial stability. Over and over again. And we've also seen her say on multiple occasions that 90% of the 87,000 new IRS agents that were hired by Joseph Biden and the Harris administration are going to go after low and middle income taxpayers. Now, do you people that did not vote for Trump, are you beginning to understand why people didn't vote for Kamala Harris? There's hundreds and hundreds of reasons. This is one of many. Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote to hire 87,000 new IRS agents to screw you in the rear. 87,000. And Janet Yellen came out and said, yeah, you're right. About 90% of the new IRS audits are going to be going after low and middle income taxpayers, families, and small businesses. They're not going after the rich. They're going after the little guy. That's why you have to report your $600 Venmo payments and your $600 PayPal payments. And if you don't, well, the IRS audits you. And if they find out you lied, they could send you to federal prison.
Our time is short here, so I'll try to be quick in answering some very concise questions. We have serious concerns about the impact that the $80 billion that the IRS is receiving and its impact on families and small businesses. There are concerns about the funding stemming from the fact that we're working from disparate statements from the administration. So I'm glad you're here to help clarify. 2021, the Treasury released an analysis right here that states $80 billion in additional IRS funding would be used to increase the total headcount at IRS compared to 2021 by almost 87,000 employees over the next decade. Is that accurate? Is that correct?
The vast majority of those hires are to replace attrition, people who would be retiring. So
okay, so the attrition is about 12,000 personnel over the last 10 years.
Over 10 years, it's much larger than that.
Okay, the record reflects that the headcount decreased by 12,000 over the last decade. So that would leave us at 75,000 new personnel at IRS. So I just want the record to reflect that. Now, regarding the audits, and the chairman talked a bit about this, there's been confusion about the meaning of the directive that you cited in the letter last August and then repeated here today. So are you talking about the total number of audits, or are you talking about the proportion of audits on families and small businesses under $400,000?
I'm talking about the proportion of those small businesses and families.
Okay, so the proportion, I mean, just for the record, the proportion is 90%. So 90% of the new audits will be, according to the data, that we can expect up to 90% of new audits to be on those making less than $400,000.
The purpose of this legislation is to vastly increase the audit rates
yes,
on
we understand.
high income, high wealth
Right,
complex partnerships.
But the data reflects that it's broader than that, especially given the number of personnel. But
The
shifting
extent
gears,
that the number of taxpayers
I understand. Okay,
earning less than $400,000 increases the audit rates.
the rates
and
of
risk
audit,
will not,
the
will
rates
not
of audit,
rise.
and the commitments, are certain.
They're always telling us exactly what they're going to do. All you have to do is pay attention. We knew that inflation was going to get out of control before it happened. And we also know that hedge funds and the shadow banking sector are about to implode. In my opinion, that is why Gary Gensler, Jamie Lizarraga, Janet Yellen are already resigning from their posts at the SEC and the United States Treasury.
I have the same question for you, please, other than...
Now, keep in mind, this was a testimony in front of Congress by both Jerome Powell and Janet Yellen. And this was, yes, 3 years ago now. But as you can see here, this is the most replayed portion of this entire video for good reason, because I've replayed this on this channel many times. They're telling us exactly what's going to happen before it happens. They told us about inflation in 2021 before it became a massive problem in 22. They told us that it was going to be out of control. They told us that hedge funds and the shadow banking sector are going to implode. It has not yet happened. They're fleeing the sinking ship, and they're setting Donald Trump and the Trump administration up to make it appear as if they're at fault for what's about to happen. And here it is.
The ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and the terrible economic toll that it's taking and the terrible health toll that it's taking. Looking more broadly, what do you assess to be the most significant systemic risks or threats to financial stability?
I think there are threats to financial stability that have come from the growth of activity in the shadow banking sector. We saw some of those threats emerge during the onset of the pandemic. We have, for example, open-end bond funds that guarantee daily redemption, saw massive withdrawals by individuals who wanted to flee to cash, and that can trigger fire sales of assets with systemic consequences. The Financial Stability Oversight Council that I head has taken that up as a topic that we're looking at and examining. There are issues relating to hedge funds and the possibility of leverage there that can trigger financial runs. That's another topic. And
I don't even have to say anything. You already know. Tyler, welcome, my friend. Appreciate you supporting the channel as a member. Thank you very much. You guys already know what's going on there. They're consistently telling us what's going to happen before it happens. And they're not telling the people, we the people. They're telling Congress because they are under oath here to tell the truth. Of course, when they come out in front of the TV and tell the mainstream media, they say inflation is transitory and everything is fine. This was 3 years ago, remember? This was Janet Yellen in front of Congress telling the truth. This is Janet Yellen on CNBC telling lies to the public.
Terry, what's your advice then to the employers who say they are having difficulty hiring workers? One suggestion has been made to perhaps raise wages, but if businesses have to compete with plussed up unemployment benefits, won't that result in an increase in consumer prices and touch off an inflationary cycle that so many experts have been worried about?
well, I really doubt that we're going to see an inflationary cycle, although I will say that all the economists in the administration are watching that very closely. As my colleagues have said, the CEA put out a blog post on this. We expect somewhat higher inflation over the next several months for a variety of essentially technical reasons because of something called base effects that in year-over-year comparisons right now, the months in which prices fell the most are moving out of the average, and that leaves us with the months in which they were rebounding toward more normal levels. But that's a transitory thing, not something that's associated with a buildup in wage pressures. I mean, with respect to wages, the best data that we have suggests that wage growth has really not picked up meaningfully. And in areas where you do see some pickup, for example, this month in services, there was a pickup in wages, but still, that's an area where wages actually fell at the beginning of the pandemic, and, we're seeing...
Again, I'm not even going to play this entire video, because you can see the marked difference in Janet Yellen when she's talking to the mainstream media. She knows it's going to be on the news. And this is the times when they tell the American people what they want them to hear, what they want to hear. But when they're telling the truth in front of Congress, under oath, they're telling, because they know that the majority of people in the world, even especially in the United States, are not ever going to take a look at this. This is over 3 years old, and only 84,000 people have seen this so far on CNBC. And I am proud to say that hundreds of thousands more have seen this now on our YouTube channel here. If you're interested in learning more about this kind of stuff in the future, make sure you like and subscribe to this channel, because we are here to share information and educate. Because here you can see 3 years ago she was telling the truth about hedge funds and the shadow banking sector. It has not yet come to fruition, but she was also telling people at the same time on TV that inflation was transitory, and we all know that that's not the case. She knew in 2021, way before this video was taken in 2022, that inflation was not going to be transitory, that it was going to reach unmanageable levels, and that drastic things were to be done. I showed it to you again on this channel in 2021 via the Bureau of Labor Statistics and Janet Yellen's own words. Now, you can see just last year, Senator John Cornyn brought up Janet Yellen's past statements of inflation being transitory to her face. He didn't let her get away with it. He called her out on it for being a lying bitch.
The only matter that's off the table is taking a pass on it. We've got to act. Senator Cornyn, you're next.
Good morning, Madam Secretary. When you testified before this committee almost 2 years ago, you were asked whether inflation was transitory. And you told the committee that you saw important transitory influences at work, but you did not anticipate that inflation would be in any way permanent. You predicted our economy was on track to get back to more normal operation, and that inflation would decline over time, something we all hoped for. To be fair, you weren't the only person who forecast transitory inflation. The chairman of the Federal Reserve, Jay Powell, did the same, as did the President of the United States. We now know that inflation rose to a level not seen in more than 40 years, and that inflation accelerated, particularly following the enactment of the partisan American Rescue Plan Act in 2021, and then with the so-called Inflation Reduction Act in 2022, which together added $2.6 trillion to our national debt. Obviously, all this stimulus going into a constrained economy with supply chains the way they were, workforce levels down, obviously created, was like pouring gasoline on the inflation fire. And though inflation has now come down to 6% or so, that's hardly good news to my constituents who are still struggling to keep up with rising costs. We know both record housing costs, which we've talked about a little bit here today, and high grocery bills are squeezing consumers all across the country. And to make matters worse, real average hourly earnings, the cash earnings of all workers, adjusted for inflation, declined last month and are down over the last year. In other words, because of inflation, workers have gotten a pay cut. Well, first we saw high inflation and then higher interest rates, of course, and that brings me to the failure of the Silicon Valley Bank and another bank in this last week. Some have suggested that this was an example of mismanagement at the time of higher interest rates and higher inflation. Others are saying, where are the regulators? Were they asleep at the wheel? Many have suggested that banking regulators need to focus more on regulating banks, protecting depositors and taxpayers instead of straying off course and examining so-called climate-related risks and other social engineering goals. I think these are all fair points. When you look at the confluence of concerning economic factors, there is one unavoidable truth. We need to get our fiscal house in order, something that the administration pays lip service to, but which seems uninterested in working with Republicans to try to address. And the president's budget proposal, of course, just makes that clear, because it offers more taxes, more spending, and more debt. Spending would be at historical levels relative to the economy. The national debt would continue to grow. Social Security and Medicare, which are on a path to insolvency. There is no proposal from the president to deal with these impending disasters. Of course, interest costs to service this debt would reach about $1 trillion annually. Our ability to defend our country in an increasingly dangerous world would be diminished because we'd be spending more money paying interest to the bondholders rather than paying to keep the American people safe. And Americans, of course, would be punished with trillions in higher taxes at a time when tax revenues are already at historical levels. It's not that the American people are taxed too little, it's that the federal government continues to spend too much and incur too much debt, which in turn creates this unvirtuous cycle. One final point, last year the administration pushed through an $80 billion blank check for the IRS without a spending plan. Only in Washington, D.C. would Congress pass an $80 billion spending appropriation without any plan as to how it's going to be implemented. And we were told, well, it will be forthcoming. That's great, but that's the opposite of what you would do it in the real world. First, you would want to know what is the plan, and then you would ask, how much does it take to finance or pay for that plan? Well, now the administration wants another $29 billion, which would bring the total up to $110 billion. This, of course, is going to mean more audits, more red tape, and violate the president's promise that no one paying less than $400,000 in taxes would pay any more. So, unfortunately, the president's budget misses the mark, which is disappointing, but unfortunately pretty consistent with what we've seen from this administration.
Ooh.
Thank you, Senator Cornyn. Next would be Senator Bennett, followed by...
Just don't stop coming with the hits here. And it's all true. Everything he said is true about the ridiculous amount of overspending. This administration had absolutely zero interest in actually helping America. They just wanted to spend and launder as much money as physically possible. And Janet Yellen has been doing just that. Her laundering of money has been a Hunger Games style race, some have said, to the bottom. And she's leaving us with an absolute mess.
Has a news alert on Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. Elon?
Well, Yellen just wrapped up her testimony before the Senate Finance Committee, where she admitted that she misjudged the path of inflation over the past year. Take a listen.
When I said that inflation would be transitory, what I was not anticipating was a scenario in which we would end up contending with multiple variants of COVID. I was not envisioning impacts on food and energy prices we've seen from Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So, as Chair Powell indicated himself. Both of us probably could have used a better term than transitory.
So
this lying bitch still wants to gaslight people into believing that Russia is the cause of our inflation. She has a gold-plated resume, Ivy League degrees, and has been the Fed chair, and now gave us just the opposite. We, as the American people, are paying the price for their greed and mismanagement, but it's been purposeful. They haven't done this on accident. They've done it on purpose. And we're not done paying the price for their mismanagement. Even if the financial media, even if the mainstream media, even if the Soros media is overlooking the fiscal time bomb that has been devised by Janet Yellen. And this time bomb will blow up while Donald Trump is in office. A lot of people out there may be ignorant to the fact of what's going on right now are going to blame Donald Trump. But it's up to people like us who are well-informed. It's up to people like you watching this channel right now who are well-informed, have been following this for a long time, to show them, no, look, this is the process. In 2020, we saw record spending. In 2021, we saw spending get out of control. And before inflation occurred, Janet Yellen and the Bureau of Labor Statistics came out and told us that if we keep up at this current pace, inflation is going to be on an unstoppable path. And we saw in 2022, they lied and called it transitory, even though they knew it was going to be an unstoppable path. They continue to fudge the job numbers. They continue to steal from you with this invisible tax called inflation. And then in 2023, they continued to lie about it and print record amounts of money. $1 trillion every 3 months. They're printing $1 trillion every 3 months in office right now. And who is it? It's Janet Yellen, Jerome Powell, and with the assistance of people like Gary Gensler as the right-hand man to Janet Yellen as the head of the plunge protection team. They're spending billions and billions of dollars to artificially prop up our stock markets. This is a fact. Look up the plunge protection team if you're unaware of it. And that is further leading to the inflationary issues that we're seeing. Sources who follow the bond market say that Yellen has been setting a trap for the incoming Trump administration through the way they financed the $1.8 trillion federal budget deficit that has exploded during the Biden administration with the accumulation of $36 trillion in debt. So she's moving away from long-term debt to finance the shortfalls to shorter dated securities, rolling over deficits with more and more Treasury bills instead of the normal way debt issuance through 10 and 30-year debt. This is basically according to an analysis by Robert Van Battenberg, who is an influential person under the Bear Traps report, estimated that 30% of all debt is the short-term variety, 2-year notes and shorter. 2-year notes they're selling, and even shorter, 6-month notes, 3-month notes, etc. And that in 2023, that was only 15%. Now it's over 30%. They didn't lock in low rates because they could have locked them in relatively cheap interest rates for years by issuing more 10 and 30-year debts. But why are they doing that? Because the Biden administration has taken spending to ridiculous and unsustainable levels. So Yellen needed to engage into this financial chicanery, if you will, to keep interest rates low and not spook the stock market during an election year. Now that Harris has overwhelmingly lost the election to the majority voters in the United States of America, over 78 million voters have voted for Donald Trump, a vast majority by millions of votes. They can finally let the ball drop. So if Yellen had financed these deficits with 10 and 30-year bonds, that would have caused a rise in interest rates that impacted consumers, mortgages, and credit cards, but it would have also saved us a lot of pain and money in the long run. Now you're going to see it. Now we're going to have to pay for everything that the Biden administration all of this money that has been printed, we're going to have to pay for it over the next few years. And thankfully, Donald Trump and Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy and company, Ron Paul, are going to make some serious changes and cut lots and lots of money here in the future. They're going to have to do big rate cuts. Big cuts in government. And it's going to appear as if our economy is in shambles. But the reality is our economy's been in shambles for a long time, for a couple of years now, at least. And even longer if you think about it. But the only reason it hasn't been evident more is because of ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. All of that led us to where we're at now. And this is a runaway freight train of inflation that is starting to tick upward again. And it's going to continue even higher. Jordan brings up a great point. It says $17 an hour today feels like $11 an hour in 2017. Very much true. Jason, when God said, "Let there be light," Janet Yellen was the one to flip the switch. Holy shit. So thank you, Dana, Typo, Jason, everybody. I really appreciate you guys. Thank you to all the channel members and supporters. Thank you for all the supporters of Lit Exchange and all of you who are continuing to support the company. It means a lot to me and to people here in general as well. Make sure you guys check out Lit Exchange, the link on the side. This is the first time in history that a stock and crypto brokerage, an upcoming brokerage, is giving retail investors, non-accredited retail investors, that means you don't have to be rich, you can be a regular everyday folk, the opportunity to actually own equity in the company, to receive shares in the company before we launch and then eventually IPO. You will also receive first buyer's rights of additional shares and many other benefits pre-IPO and after launch. So cheers, ladies and gentlemen. Look forward to the next stream tomorrow. We're going to do another as usual. I hope you'll join me. Giles, you're absolutely right. Jordan plans to sue Rodney with your squeeze money. I love it. Says, I worked at Kroger, got $20 tax return after 2 years of being there. And after snapping at my boss over the phone, I was suspended, so really fired because everything is out of our control. And Benjamin says, I can't listen to Yellen very long because it's so painful, and I truly agree with you. I can't listen to her very long either. But it's important that we do because they're telling us a lot of things. When they're talking to each other, they're telling the truth. But of course, when they're talking to the mainstream media, to CNBC, and they're telling us lies, that things they just want us to hear. So thank you again, everybody. Typo Negative, you as well, for your kindness and support of the channel and all of the channel members.